And I will be honest here, I'm not quite sure that the ranking member, who was at all hearings at all times, was able to make that hearing. He may have popped in or out, but he knows that briefing took place and what it was about. In the months that followed, the Appropriations Committee has discussed this issue at 12 subcommittee hearings. We've held extensive conversations with security experts in and out of government. And I am so grateful for the work of the 6 subcommittee chairs of jurisdiction. Congresswoman Lucille Roybal Allard of Homeland Security, Congresswoman Betty McCollum, Defense, Congressman Ryan of Ledge Branch, Congressman Quigley of Financial Services, Congresswoman Pingree of the Interior Subcommittee, and Congressman Cartwright of the Commerce Justice State Subcommittee. We have also carefully examined the Task Force 1-6 Capitol Secure Review led by Retirement Lieutenant General Russell L. Honore and comprised of senior law enforcement experts and retired military leaders. The Capitol Security Review provided critical recommendations to address the immediate needs of the Capitol Police and on the physical and policy changes that are necessary and needed to secure the Capitol, members, and employees. Moreover, we have heard from the Capitol Police Inspector General, who identified shortcomings and recommended areas in need of additional resources and incorporated these ideas throughout the legislation. And finally, some of the most important conversations we have had in shaping this legislation were with you, my fellow members. Recognizing the importance of responding quickly, this legislation is narrowly tailored to January 6th and related security needs. We resisted attempts to include extraneous provisions. Mr. Chairman, to briefly summarize, this legislation contains $1.9 billion in emergency supplemental appropriations to respond to the costs incurred because of the tragic events of January 6th, protects the facilities, members, employees, and visitors going forward, and provides for safe and healthy congressional operations. This legislation responds to the direct costs incurred by the attack on the Capitol by reimbursing the National Guard with $521 million and the District of Columbia with $67 million for their response. It provides $44 million for the Capitol Police to cover overtime pay, retention bonuses, equipment replacement, and wellness and trauma support. This includes a provision renaming the Capitol Police Wellness Center in memory of Officer Howie Liebengood. To continue prosecuting the hundreds of perpetrators who attacked law enforcement and ransacked the People's House, the legislation provides nearly $40 million to the Department of Justice, as well as an additional smaller reimbursements to agencies like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, U.S. Marshal Service, and the Bureau of Prisons. Looking to the future, the legislation strengthens the security of the Capitol complex by hardening windows and doors, constructing security screening vestibules, and installing new cameras at a total cost of $530 million. It provides $18 million for specialized training, riot control equipment, body cameras for the Capitol Police. And to augment the Capitol Police in future emergencies, this bill appropriates $200 million for a dedicated quick reaction force of National Guard personnel. The legislation also bolsters security for members of Congress with dedicated funding for enhanced security and threat assessments, coordinated member travel security, and upgrades to security in district offices. To address security threats in the judicial branch, the legislation provides nearly $183 million for the security at courthouses and for federal judges, many of whom are presiding over trials of January 6th insurrectionists. And finally, it provides funding for reimbursements and the ongoing response to ensure congressional operations are healthy, they're safe amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. I believe there is broad support for these resources since funding for legislative branch COVID-19 needs was not included in recent legislation. Mr. Chairman, while we will soon establish a commission to investigate the January 6th domestic terrorism attack on the United States Capitol, it is our responsibility to act now, not later. We need to provide the resources necessary to protect the Capitol and those who work and those who visit here. Chairman McGovern, Ranking Member Cole, I have talked to the Capitol Police, who protect us every day. They cannot wait, and we cannot wait. I respectfully request an appropriate rule for floor consideration of the essential legislation and look forward to answering your questions. Thank you, and yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Granger.
Chairman McGovern, Ranking Member Cole, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to testify on this supplemental funding bill to address the security of the Capitol complex and other issues. I wish we were here today to discuss a bipartisan proposal that could easily pass the House and the Senate and be signed into law. Unfortunately, that is not the case. I agree with my distinguished committee chair, Ms. DeLauro, that the events of January 6th exposed serious concerns about the security of the Capitol. I also agree with her that Congress must act to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. For several weeks, Republicans and Democrats on the House and Senate Appropriation Committees had been working in good faith on a funding package. We were not yet in full agreement on some of the costs, many of which are subject to ongoing review by the architect of the Capitol, but we thought we were making progress. Unfortunately, the bipartisan negotiations we were holding with our Senate colleagues on what this bill should contain stalled late last week. By choosing to forge ahead with this bill today, I'm concerned that my colleagues are more interested in making headlines instead of headway. Without the support of House and Senate Republicans, this bill is likely headed nowhere fast, I'm afraid. I also know that these issues do not break neatly along party lines. Senate Democrats share some of our concerns. Chairman Leahy has noticed that it is important for the Capitol to remain open and accessible to the public and not feel like a militarized zone, and I agree with him. The proposal for the National Guard to stand up a quick reaction force is one that requires more thought and discussion by all parties. Unfortunately, pushing this bill through the House this week may only serve to delay it from being enacted. I hope we can come back to the table and work together to craft a bill that can pass through both chambers and get signed into law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. I support this bill, and I want to thank Chairwoman DeLauro for all of her incredible work and all the time that went into this. I mean, the question that I get asked most by people is, what the hell is taking everybody so long? Why is it taking so long to get a bill to basically provide the resources to protect the Capitol complex that was attacked on January 6th? Why the hell has it taken so long for you guys to get a commission together to investigate what happened on January 6th? And I, for the life of me, I don't know why this is at all controversial. Chairwoman DeLauro, Mr. Cole talked about a Republican counteroffer. Can you tell us, why wasn't that acceptable? What didn't it address?
Well, let me just first say that we proceeded with very good faith negotiations. As I said, there were 12 committee meetings. There was a general honoré, had briefed bipartisan, did a bipartisan briefing, which we all attended. Everyone had the opportunity to ask the questions. There were numerous, in addition to the appropriations committees, other committees who were addressing to both Democrats and Republicans the issue of January 6th. Let me just say to you, and I really literally have documented every day that we either met or were in conversation with our Republican counterparts. and also with the notion that we were trying to move quickly and that we were looking to May to move forward. I can describe to you the Republican offer, which I have right here in front of me. And the problem with that offer, which is that the defense COVID expenses made up 1/2 of the total of their bill, which was $2.4 billion. I might add, because someone will say, well, why would we not think about defense and COVID? Well, if we just go back very briefly, we will find that the Defense Department has received $10.6 billion in COVID expense reimbursement through the CARES bills or the prior relief bills. So I have, again, in front of me, a document that really the defense COVID cost of this bill, quite frankly, in my view, was not a serious proposal in terms of looking at what we needed to move forward on in terms of securing the Capitol, protecting members, prosecuting those who had breached the Capitol and caused the damage and the destruction that they did that day. And I would be happy to go through item by item at either at this point or another with regard to what that proposal looked like. And we made that known to our counterparts. We thought we had made real progress on moving forward. We had calls with the four corners, and I might add that what was a very interesting comment by the minority leader in a letter, again, in which I have a copy here right in front of me. He says, this was his letter dated May 11th from Leader McCarthy to Speaker Pelosi. And it was about the Independent Commission, but he says, finally, as part of the purpose of the commission is to improve the security posture of the United States Capitol complex. The legislation must also require the commission to report findings by November 1st in order to allow sufficient time to be included in an end of the year funding bill to strengthen the security of the Capitol complex. So there was no desire to move with focused on January 6th, to move with dispatch to secure the Capitol. If the minority leader's view was that this could wait until the end of the year, then it really is not understanding the seriousness and the nature of what happened on January 6th and why it is important for us to move with dispatch. We have a Capitol Police today. I stop and talk with them every day, as I am sure most people on this call do, every single day. How are you? How are you doing? Hanging in. How's your family? Scared. When are we going to act? We are acting. And there are others who did not want to act. It is our obligation, our responsibility to act, which is what we did with conversation and discussion and debate with our House Republican colleagues, our Senate Republican colleagues, and our Senate Democratic colleagues.
Thank you very much. Look, this is not a game. I was here on January 6th. Many of you were here on January 6th. We saw what happened to this Capitol complex on January 6th, I'm still angry at the trauma that was inflicted on our staff, on the people who work here in the Capitol. I talked to a woman working in the coffee shop in the basement of the Capitol, who a couple of days later, who was horrified about what happened here. Clearly, we weren't prepared, and we need to be better prepared. That's what this is all about, right? And this can't be politics as usual. This can't be business as usual. This can't be delay, delay, delay. Or it can't be Donald Trump's having a temper tantrum and doesn't want us to talk about these issues, so we're going to do nothing. That's just unacceptable. That is an abdication of our responsibility as members of Congress up here. So this is going to go to the Senate. I'm sure there'll be some changes and some additions, and it'll come back here. But I mean, if this isn't an urgent matter, then I don't know what the hell is. We all want this place to open up. We want it to be open for our constituents, for tourists, for visitors. But we want this Capitol complex to be secure. I've talked to the members of the Capitol Police too, who are begging us to do more. Well, this is more, and this has been done in a responsible way. So I urge all my colleagues to support this bill. I ask unanimous consent to insert a statement of administration policy in support of H.R. 3237. At this time, I turn to the ranking member, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me go first to Ranking Member Granger. I'm disappointed, as I'm sure you are, Ranking Member, that the first appearance by the Appropriations Committee before us this year is under these circumstances, where you and the chairwoman are in fundamental disagreement on this legislation. Isn't it true that the supplemental appropriations bills are typically bipartisan? And what happened this time so that the majority felt it necessary to bring a partisan bill to the floor?
Mr. Chair, may I speak? Mr. Chair,
yes.
The chair did not bring us into negotiations until a few weeks ago. And we passed one proposal back, and there was absolutely no discussion whatsoever. I regret that we're in this position. The issue is very, very important. It is a situation that we should move as fast as we can, but we were completely left out of this, and I think that is a mistake, and we could have worked this out. Thank you.
Again, to Ranking Member Granger, you actually mentioned discuss the Senate, and do you have any expectation the Senate's prepared to immediately take up this legislation? We all know that the House by itself can't simply impose its will on the other body. You have to have agreement with the other body to move, in a hurry. So, again, you alluded to this a little bit in your comments, but what's your understanding of where the Senate is right now?
That's a situation exactly, and I don't think they're prepared to pass this, and we're losing an opportunity, which makes it slower. This is the situation. I think had we had discussion, which is the way we've always worked since I've been on appropriations, and to not do that, I think was a serious mistake, and I regret it.
So wouldn't it have been better? And look, we arrived in this situation at the end of even normal appropriations bills. We have our disagreements here. Doesn't matter who's in the majority. The initial bill tends to be partisan. We all know that the final negotiation, the one that matters, is with the United States Senate. It's out of that negotiation that you have, legislation that can pass both houses and be signed by the president. So wouldn't it have been better for you and the chair to continue to negotiate the bill, bringing in the senators, see if we can reach an agreement, particularly on a supplemental, because you always want to move a supplemental quickly. That's the purpose. That's something out of the norm. That's something we feel like we have to act on right now. So, wouldn't it have been better for the two of you to have negotiated with your counterparts in the United States Senate, come up with a bill, and then be presenting something like that with us today, to us today?
I think that would certainly been a better way to handle this. And I think we would move ahead and have something we all agree on and give the support to our police that we talked about today. And I regret that this is the situation, how it's being handled.
Yeah, thank you very much. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairwoman DeLauro, for your patience and constant updates to all of the members of our committee on this issue. On January 6th, the U.S. Capitol went from being the cradle of our democracy to what felt like a war zone. I was in the House chamber, in the balcony, to be more specific, without a way out for 45 minutes. 45 minutes. A place that has always been a sanctuary, a place where we have always felt safe. That day, I crawled on my hands and knees in a gas mask, scratching the cornea of my eye in the process. I heard the gunshot that ended a woman's life. I saw barricades go up on the doors around me with any tables and chairs the Capitol Police could find. The sanctity of this body was pierced in a way that was utterly unimaginable. I hope for the sake of this nation, for the sake of future generations, that this will never happen again. And that we ourselves are prepared to answer that call to duty to never allow that to happen again. A Capitol Police officer died that day, and we lost 2 more since then because of the trauma that they endured. It was too much to bear. Many people who were in this building, from officers to members, staff, the maintenance crew that pick up our trash every day, those are innocent people, will carry the scars of this day for the rest of their lives. And while our democracy endured, our purpose here today is to fund the protective measures that take the necessary steps to ensure one of this body's darkest moments will never be repeated again. This emergency security supplemental package pays back the National Guard, the District of Columbia, and other federal agencies for their responses that fateful day. It supports the Capitol Police with overtime pay, retention bonuses, equipment replacement, and wellness for the trauma support that they have endured and continue to endure. It also holds the perpetrators who storm these halls accountable and prosecutes them for their crimes. It will fund new windows, doors, and security cameras. It will create a dedicated quick reaction force for future security threats. And it will give our heroes, the Capitol Police, who use their own bodies as their shields, the riot gear and training that they should have had that day. Colleagues, this is the very least that we can do to safeguard our democracy and do right by the men and women who sacrificed so much that day and the innocent bystanders. Whatever headlines you may be fearing already happened on January 6th. That history has already been written. I urge each and every one of you to join me in supporting this package. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just ask, because I've been looking through the legislative language, and I just heard the comment that it repays the National Guard for their participation to either of our witnesses. Is that correct?
Yes, the National Guard, there's $521 million to pay for the operation costs for the Guard deployment from January 6th throughout the Capital Region from January 6th to May 23rd. And this was funding that was requested by the Department of Defense.
So let me just ask you a question. Are we reimbursing the states from which these National Guard units were deployed, are we reimbursing the states for their expenses?
No, we are not.
What, is that something that was considered?
I will, I don't know that the Guard, I don't know that the Department of Defense asked us to deal with, where the folks were coming from, took care of their operations, their pay, etc. And this is, it's not a state expense. This was a Defense Department expense. So that's what we were doing, is to pay the cost to the Defense Department.
Well, let me just ask both of you, both of our witnesses, and thank you for being here. But during the hearings on this, did this subject come up? Were there costs incurred by the states for the deployment of their units to Washington, D.C. for the term of their deployment?
No, not that I know.
Should we have asked the states if there were expenses that they incurred?
Well, since it is not a state expense, it's a Department of Defense expense.
But they're state guard units that were deployed. I'm just asking the question because I don't know the answer, and people pose it to me. So I thought I would ask of our witnesses. Apparently, though, it didn't come up in your hearings on this supplemental.
What came up was what the Department of Defense asked for, the $521 million. That's what was asked.
All right,
and we were responsive to it.
Let me just ask of Representative Granger, Ranking Member Granger. You referenced your beginning of your comments about that you'd hope for a bipartisan proposal. Do you think that by perhaps opening the process up, we are the Rules Committee, we are the ones that decide how legislation is brought to the floor, whether it's an open or structured or closed rule? Do you think it is possible through the amendment process that we might make this a more bipartisan product by opening up the rules process? So again, the question to Representative Granger was: do you think we could make this a more bipartisan product by opening up the rules process, perhaps to a structured rule or even an open rule?
I think that would be helpful for it to go to the rules.
Look, let me ask you this: do we, in either of you, do we have a timeline from the architect of the Capitol when we will likely be able to open the building back up to the public? Because at the end of the day, this is the people's house.
Sorry, let's mute and unmute here. My understanding is that we are waiting to get to the deliberation of when we can fully open the Capitol and allow people back in and visitors, etc. So I don't have a specific timeline for you with regard to that. I will make a comment on your prior question that the Guard is activated not only for state duty but for federal activities as well. So it's a federal status, as I understand it, and the states are fine. So that's recent information.
Very well. You can be assured I will ask my state if that is indeed their understanding as well. Let me just ask you on this, on the quick reaction force that is discussed. Is it envisioned that the quick reaction force is going to be within the Capitol Police itself, or is that a National Guard quick reaction force?
It is with the D.C. National Guard, and I thought that General Walker, who was recently appointed to the position of Sergeant at Arms in the House, has recommended that we have such a force. And as you know, he was a director of the Guard prior to taking on this responsibility of this Sergeant at Arms in the House.
Yeah, I think it was a surprise to a lot of us that there wasn't the ability to quickly respond to an incident at the Capitol. We're not immune from a protest and public demonstration. I mean, it happens all the time. Certainly the last 20 years or 19 years that I've been here, there have been multiple times when there's been significant unease across the country, and it has sort of manifested itself in protests around the Capitol. I apparently was in error in assuming that there was already a provision for protection of the Capitol in times of stress or crisis. Did that not exist? Had we not appropriated money for that in the past?
Well, I would really, if it would even get you the testimony of that January 26th briefing that we held in a bipartisan way, I might add.
I appreciate that. I was there at the briefing, and again, I was startled that there wasn't already a provision for quick reaction.
Well, but the fact is that the way that it proceeded is that, and no one quite knows to this date why the order wasn't given in a much accelerated time frame to deploy the Guard. That was the issue as to getting the sign off for deployment of the Guard, and it was held up. And again, we do not yet know what the cause of that was in terms of making sure that the Guard was there. This quick reaction force will act just like the Air Guard now does for airspace.
So, again, just an observation. It seems that some of our attention perhaps could be given to what the Capitol Police is able to provide us in quick reaction, because they are the people on the front lines, if you will. We're
trying to address in this very piece of legislation that we need to really to equip the National Guard, not the National Guard, with the Capitol Police with more of the tools that they need to be able to act. You will also recall on that day there was hardly any command and control with regard to the Capitol Police and what their responsibilities or duties and so forth. And quite frankly, and there was just this morning on the news that the intelligence was out there, except it had not been analyzed, and nor had intelligence been passed on to the Capitol Police. And we try to address those issues. So there were lots of shortfalls, which addresses what we try to address in the supplemental.
I just remember a different time when a president said the buck stops here. I'm just wondering where the buck stopped that morning. Why was there insensitivity to intelligence? Why was there lack of preparation? I heard from a number of people who work in the Capitol that expressed concern about things that might happen on Wednesday. If it's down to the level of people who work in the Capitol, why was that concern not manifested at the upper echelons of our power structure here? Representative Crenshaw, let me just ask you a question, because our colleague Dan Crenshaw has asked for an amendment to your appropriations bill that would require reporting on costs and recommendations related to the United States Capitol Police having their emergency response teams have vehicles that they could take home with them, so that their ability to respond quickly would be enhanced. Was that not covered in the baseline text of the supplemental appropriation?
It was not addressed, and perhaps if it goes to rules, there could be some help there on that. I understand we had 2 hearings from the acting chief of the DC police about a week apart, and the testimony was significantly different the second time it came about what happened, when they knew, what the process was.
Well, I think our colleague Representative Crenshaw has brought up an excellent point, and I will look forward to offering that an amendment to the rule, Mr. Chairman, if it's not made as part of the base structure. So thank you all for your attendance this morning. I'm going to yield back.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Burgess. And I think a lot of the questions you asked will be answered by the commission that we'll be discussing next. And I just want to say for the record, it's always lovely to hear you talk about open rules, because when I look back at the 115th Congress, when your party was in charge and you were on the Rules Committee, you didn't vote for a single open rule. In fact, you voted for more closed rules than any other Congress in history. So, but anyway, I just wanted to point that out for the record. Happy to yield now to Mr. Raskin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman DeLauro, Madam Chair, thank you for your hard work on this legislation. How much of the money is going to actually pay for the expenses of dealing with January 6th itself versus how much the money is forward-looking to protect ourselves against the next violent insurrection against the Union?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
The majority of the funds, and I can get you a breakdown, is going for the reimbursement of funds.
Okay. I mean, so I'm looking at the breakdown, like the money for the National Guard, for DC emergency planning, Capitol Police, Architect of the Capitol, prosecution support, Library of Congress. A lot of that looks like it's backward looking to deal with the cost of January 6th. Is that right? You're saying most of it. In my head, it looks like it's something like $740 million, something like that. But maybe your staff could get that.
It will get you a precise number.
Okay. So that's an extraordinary sum of money that violent insurrection is costing the people of the United States, right? They unleashed mob violence against the Capitol. They beat up our police officers, hitting them over the heads with flagpoles and spearing people, spraying bear mace in their face. It was a scene of absolute chaos and wreckage, and it's costing us hundreds of millions of dollars. Did you talk about whether the United States has an action in restitution against the organizers and the inciters of this costly attack on the United States? Can we sue?
I'm not an attorney, so I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that question, Congressman Raskin.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable to me that we're talking about taking money from the taxpayers to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to pay for this cost of this mayhem, this havoc that was visited upon the Capitol. And we're not talking about suing the people who caused it. You know, Madam Chair, if somebody came into your house and wrecked all that beautiful artwork you've got behind you and tore up the place and broke down your doors and smashed your windows and beat people up, yeah, you'd want them prosecuted, but wouldn't you also, if you've determined who organized it, wouldn't you also want restitution? Because that's costing you a lot of money, right?
Yes, indeed.
All right, well, I hope we don't leave it at this. I mean, I don't think our attitude should be, yeah, we're fair game. Anybody who wants to come and beat the hell out of our police officers and smash our windows and trash the place, come and do it. Oh, and we'll hit up the taxpayers to pay for your rampage.
We can pursue that. We'd like to pursue it.
I mean, this is real money, hundreds of millions of dollars that we're having to pay. Now, if somebody comes and ransacks your house and storms your living room, and you've got to put in an alarm system for the future, and you've got to, you've got to fortify your house and build new windows and so on. All right, maybe, I don't know that a court would allow you to charge those people for that going forward, just because they've changed the terms of engagement in the United States. One of my colleagues was puzzled about why the Capitol Police weren't ready for it, and I think we need to look into that too. But certainly none of us has ever experienced a violent fascist insurrection in the capital of the United States before. That's a new thing, right? I mean, you've been in Congress for a while, Madam Chair. Have we ever experienced anything like this in your experience?
Nothing like this. And I, like Ms. Torres, was in the gallery that day, and it was. I quite frankly didn't know when they asked us to reach for gas masks under the seats in the House chamber that I didn't know we had gas masks in the House chamber, let alone know how to put on a gas mask. Told to evacuate. Saw the smashing of the glass to the chamber doors, and gunshots, where we were all asked to drop to the floor, crouched behind the chairs on the perimeter of the. And I'll just tell you one personal answer. You were right about the federal government is picking up the responsibility and the reimbursement for the costs that insurrectionists who were incited to come to the Capitol to really, and the clarity when you take a look at what the intelligence was that day, the target of that insurrection and overturning our democratic election was the Congress.
That's right.
Congress, and it was clarity. It was clear.
Yeah.
That information, as one of my Republican colleagues said in the briefing, that in January 26th, is we had all of the intelligence, we had the information, and that then administration did nothing.
Right. Well, far from assisting us, not only was there nothing done to help us, but in fact, it's been determined by bicameral majorities, robust bicameral majorities, and bipartisan majorities in the House and the Senate as a constitutional fact that then President Donald Trump incited the violent insurrection against us. Bipartisan, bicameral majorities in the House and Senate have determined as a constitutional fact that's exactly what happened. And of course, everyone knows that. I mean, the big Stop the Steal rally to overthrow the election result in 2020 was not called for Georgia, although he did try to browbeat and intimidate the Secretary of State of Georgia. It was not called in Pennsylvania, although he tried to get the Republican legislative leaders in Pennsylvania to overthrow the popular result and just instate a Trump electoral college slate. It wasn't called for California, it was called for Washington, D.C., and it wasn't called on January 17th or December 20th or some other date. It was called on January 6th, the date when Congress constitutionally had to meet in joint session in order to count the electoral college votes. And it was called for 1 hour before that. And then everyone knows, as Congresswoman Cheney, the former chair of the House Republican Conference, put it, he assembled the mob, he recruited the mob, he incited the mob, he invited the mob, he ignited the mob. The whole thing is due to him, as Congresswoman Cheney bravely put it before she was canceled out a few days ago. It was all due to him. None of it would have happened without him. And so we know that. And now the taxpayers are being forced to pick up hundreds of millions of dollars because he refused to accept the election result in 2020. Is that not what's going on here? The taxpayers are being shaken down for $700 or $800 million to pay for the rampage. Well, that's an extraordinary thing for me. And I support us doing that because we have a responsibility to defend ourselves. But I hope we don't leave it at that. I hope that there is a restitutionary action undertaken to get the money from the people who unleashed this violence against us. And we know precisely who they were. In terms of all of the money going forward, I support that too, because the Department of Homeland Security, both in this administration and in the last administration, has said that domestic violent extremism, political white supremacy, is the #1 terror threat in the country. And we've seen it all over the country in attacks on churches, in attacks on synagogues, in attacks in Walmarts, all over the place. We have seen this domestic violent extremist movement attacking our government, attacking our people. So we've got to defend ourselves, and we got to make this investment. Thank you for your work, Madam Chair, and I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Reschenthaler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Granger, is there anything that hasn't been discussed, or would you like to weigh in on anything that's been brought up?
Well, I certainly will. The situation before, the speaker before talked about how this happened. I think one of the things that's important for us to realize that this may not be a single event. And for us to be prepared for something like this, there's a cost to it. And that's why I wish we were working in a bipartisan way, because it's hard to look at this seriously and come together to make serious decisions about how we go forward. There have been several hundred people identified because I think they were not aware that there are cameras all over the building they were in. And so we have proof of what people were doing. And there are all sorts of people that were there. If we knew all the people that caused this, the organizations, that would be a different thing. Part of this is to be looking at that and see not only who's responsible, but how we keep it from happening again. And that's very important. I think it's very important that we move together in doing this, because we owe it to the citizens in our districts, and we owe it to the people that keep us safe here in the Capitol, and how we go forward to make sure that we have people there that can respond, and that we don't look at this as a single incident, but what caused it and how we can prevent it. I think it's very important.
Ranking Member Granger, what about just the reasonable option of seeing what the commission finds and what their recommendations are, and then coming back and appropriating the money? Do you think that might be a more prudent way to go about this?
I do, and I think that would be a better way to go forward on this, because we're putting this together to say what actually happened on that day and how did it happen and who are these people. Then I think we could have a bill that is more targeted to exactly what we learned, and I think that would be important.
So I also have a concern with the quick reactionary force, or quick reaction force. I don't have a problem with the creation of one or having one. I just have an issue with it being under the control of the National Guard rather than the Capitol Police. I just feel that if we have this quick reaction force, we shouldn't have another layer that we have to go through to actually deploy the quick reaction force, which by the name alone indicates that it's for a quick reaction. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I agree with you. In that situation, I think that would be a better way to address this. I do think it's just important that we really know what we're dealing with. We know what we were dealing with that day, and also what we're dealing with today in the aftermath of that. And I think that would be very helpful in going forward.
Thanks, Ranking Member. I really appreciate it with that. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, Chairman McGovern. I believe, as the chair suggested, the time is long past to address the security needs of the Capitol for something that happened over 5 months ago. And those security needs were shockingly exposed on January 6th. At this point, many of us have participated in multiple hearings on the response to January 6th, and it's become painfully clear that there were multiple systemic failures that need to be addressed. You know, on January 6th, the illusion of security in our Capitol, in the seat of the United States government, was shattered. And not just for the people who serve here and work here, but for those terrorists and extremists and bad actors who seek to attack or damage our government. So this supplemental bill, appropriations bill, deals with many of the issues raised by the response to January 6th attack. You know, we've heard quite a bit now about understaffing and lack of training for the Capitol Police. We've heard about their lack of intel capabilities or ability to respond. All those things need to be addressed, as well as reimbursement for National Guard. The largest criminal investigation in our nation's history which has already yielded over 500 arrests of people who broke into this building, who damaged the Capitol building itself, who attacked officers of the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police, people who are still suffering from the traumatic injuries, if not the physical injuries sustained that day. So there is a lot that needs to be addressed with this supplemental bill. And it is, as I said, long overdue. I completely agree that part of preventing something like this from happening again is understanding why it occurred. And I believe that the commission, which we're taking up next, will help to do that because, unless we have a shared understanding and a shared truth of what happened that day, then this aim for unity and the trust necessary to participate in bipartisan legislation simply isn't going to occur as long as we have a substantial portion of the electorate and even of this body denying the truth of what happened or trying to silence those who would speak the truth, then we're not going to be able to get beyond this. So I wholly support the supplemental. Can I just confirm, Chairwoman DeLauro, that some of the funding in here will go towards making sure that Capitol Police are properly staffed, because as I understand it, they've been understaffed for some time. And as we heard in hearings last week, they don't have the training or the opportunity for training to allow them to address issues such as active shooters in the Capitol or mobs trying to overrun the Capitol.
Yes, let me. What we do in this bill is to get the Capitol Police their funding to what is the authorized level, and we deal with both physical and mental health issues, equipment issues, training issues, and I might add from a prior conversation that the U.S. Capitol Police has a civil disturbance unit, and the supplemental provides equipment for that as well. So what we have tried to do is to really buttress and support the Capitol Police to, quite frankly, levels that we have not seen before. Given what happened to them, what happened to the Capitol Police Force on January 6th. I might also add that it was the Capitol Security Review that made a recommendation for a quick reaction force, because their view was that there needed to be a dedicated force ready to respond to any incident. Just as I mentioned before, the D.C. Air National Guard, they have the mission to protect the region's airspace. And if you have a military battalion with personnel in permanent active guard reserve status, that means, what does that mean? They're full-time, not traditional part-time guard personnel. And that ensures that they are ready and they are able to augment the Capitol Police in case of emergency, something that did not happen on January 6th until so late in the day that it was, they were there, but it happened, not in time to do something about the scaling of the walls, breaching the Capitol, smashing windows, beating up Capitol Police, and everything that went forward on that day. So the Capitol Police and their safeguarding is at the center of what we want to try to do here for future protection.
Thank you. And I've spoken before on the fact that, obviously ramping up their intel capabilities appears to be a priority, given the fact that the threats of January 6th were, shall we say, hiding in plain view, with the former president having invited a mob to D.C. And
is about $100 million. Officer Evans, who, by the vestibule, what we have done is to put in $100 million to secure and strengthen the vestibule so that that you just can't come in and overrun that portion. If I might add to Congressman Raskin, the reimbursement funding in the bill is $665 million.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for your work on this. And as always, we're extremely grateful to the Capitol Police and the Metro Police who, saved our democracy on January 6th under the most abominable conditions, and we're grateful to them every day. Thank you. I yield back.
Ms. Fishbach. You need to unmute. We can't hear you. There you go. Okay. How are you doing? You know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Mr. Morelli and then come back to you. And if all else fails, we'll just open the window and you can scream. All right. Okay, all right. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to associate myself with my colleagues who have spoken on our side, and I want to thank Ms. DeLauro for her incredible leadership on this. This goes to the foundations of our democracy, and so I am strongly in support of the proposed rule and the underlying bill, and with that, I'll yield back.
So we'll try Ms. Fishbach again, and then if we can't get her, we'll go to Mr. DeSagne, and we'll come back.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right,
good, okay.
I feel like a Sprint commercial.
All right, okay.
But thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to ask Chair DeLauro, was there some kind of comprehensive assessment or study regarding the needs, the security needs at the Capitol campus?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. There was the task force, a 1-6 Capitol Security Review, which was led by retired Lieutenant General Russell Honoré. And it was comprised of senior law enforcement experts and retired military leaders. And so they provided critical recommendations to address the needs of the Capitol Police and on the physical and policy changes that are needed to secure the Capitol. Members, employees. In addition to that, the Capitol Police Inspector General. And I might add, if you read that report, and there was a hearing of the House Administration Committee under Chair Lofgren held a hearing on the Inspector General's report. And that report identified shortcomings. They recommended areas in need of additional resources and incorporated the ideas, what we did throughout the legislation. And I might add that the Inspector General had made recommendations, which in the past, may not have been fulfilled. But we try to hone very, very clear to expert advice. And specifically, as I say, the narrow focus was on January 6th. But there were, this was the other committees that held hearings brought in expert witnesses as well to address this issue. And as the commission will do is to bring in experts to do the review. But we worked very, very closely with the security review effort led by General Honoré.
Well, and thank you, because as I look through the resolution through HR 3237, there's not a lot of detail. There's a lot of money, but not a lot of detail necessarily of where the money is going. And so I guess I'm struggling with this is how do we really know that this is the kind of money or these are the amounts they need directed at the right things? And I will say there's an awful lot of money for COVID relief or prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. So there's a lot of money for that in there also. And so I'm just concerned about spending this kind of money. And I absolutely believe we should be funding our police officers the way we need to. I absolutely believe they have a difficult job, and I think that they're an important part of our society. But I'm going to move on, and I'm going to ask.
Well, if I can just respond for 1 second.
Sorry.
If I can, because we sent you, and we sent every member received an Emergency Security Supplemental Appropriations Act responding to the January 6th insurrection. Very detailed summary of, for instance, National Guard for pay and operations costs for Guard deployment, Capitol Police, response to the January 6th, including $31 million for salaries to backfill overtime expected, $6.9 million for hazard pay, $3.6 for retention bonuses, $3.2 for intelligence division for human and technical resources. So a very well documented a summary of all of the costs that are there. So I commend this to you. If you have not received a copy, I will make sure that you do. And with regard to Ledge Branch, the COVID dollars amount to $171 million of $1.9 billion. So thank you.
Well, and I think I have the sheets that you're referring to, and I understand. I mean, I see that on this sheet, but there's a lot of money being spent, and like I said, there's also COVID dollars and whatever percentage of it is.
71 million for Ledge Branch.
It's and I would be interested in the figures that Congressman Raskin asked for about how those were broken out. So, but moving on, I wanted to ask Ms. Granger. Dr. Burgess had asked about opening the Capitol, and I'm just wondering if there are any connection to all of these dollars that we're spending on security to opening the Capitol complex back up. Because if we're going to be spending the money, should we not be talking about? And I understand that there's no timeline, but is there any kind of connection as we spend all these dollars?
There is no requirement in this bill.
Well, and thank you. I would hope that there would be that would be the absolute goal, and the dollars would be directed in that and to that goal. But in addition to that, and I'm just wondering, Ranking Member Granger, if there is, Dr. Burgess had talked about an open rule and some of the amendments. Just wondering, are there any that you would like to see discussed by the whole body? Given that I believe this didn't go through any committee, have a full hearing in a committee. Now, you can, if I'm wrong, I stand corrected. But just wondering if there are any of those amendments that really could be discussed by the whole body and improve this bill.
I would like to see that. I would like to see more discussion so everyone will be comfortable with this. I think it's important funding. Don't get me wrong, but I think there would be a better bill if it was a bipartisan bill. I think it would be a better bill, though, if we did have that study and say, here's what we need. Honore has a distinguished career, and so he's made some suggestions and talked to me, but I think that would be very important. I don't want to go on forever, but I do think there's a time that we should be looking at this carefully, and particularly the amount. Regarding the police, there was a lag time of, looks like 3 days when some evidence that something like this was going to happen, and then nothing was done with that.
Well, and thank you, Ranking Member. I think that this is such an important issue, and the money being spent, that we should have, amendments from the minority and discussion from the minority, and full and open discussion on the floor, or if it had gone through committee. But I thank you, for your work on it, ranking member, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question for Chair DeLauro. My understanding from the beginning of your testimony was that this emergency security supplemental went through multiple subcommittees. Could you tell me, could you just recite again the subcommittees that looked at the amounts and the needs?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Thank you. As I mentioned, shortly after we began to move on the Appropriations Committee right after the 6th, at the end of January, in an absolutely bipartisan, as a matter of fact, it was a briefing. And I'll be honest, the minority asked it not to be a hearing, but rather a briefing without press, and which I said fine too. And what we did was we asked all of the chairs of the subcommittees of jurisdiction, the several that I mentioned, Ledge Branch, Defense, Homeland Security, Park, etc. The chair and the ranking member had the opportunity. We brought in all of the agencies to be able to ask questions and to get information. Not only was it just the 6 subcommittees, but the briefing again, and it was a closed briefing, as I say, because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle did not want to have a hearing, a public hearing, and so I said fine. And just because I wanted to get the information out up to us, because we had to make the decisions, and but the entire Appropriations Committee, I think we went for almost 3 hours that day, because every member of the entire Appropriations Committee had an opportunity to ask questions of the 10 agencies that we brought before us. Subsequent to that, the 12 of the again of the other subcommittees each had their individual hearings. I think Ledge Branch may have had 3 or 4 hearings. I'm sorry, Ledge Branch had 8 hearings where this was discussed. And again, the other subcommittees had hearings as well. They brought in security experts who were in government and out of government to ask the questions, to address the issues, and to make recommendations. We always asked to make recommendations because the view was, how do we go forward with this so that, in fact, it doesn't happen again? I might also add that the House administration under Chair Lofgren has had a number of hearings, including most recently, I believe, with the Inspector General on this issue. Again, oversight has had under Chairwoman Maloney had a hearing on this issue. So it wasn't just the Appropriations Committee and the 12 subcommittees, but a variety of other of our standing committees that took up this issue and to get some understanding of what happened. I say that in addition to, as I mentioned already, the security review out of the recommendations that came from General Honoré, and General Honoré briefed in a bipartisan way. All of the members answered questions and talked about recommendations that should be made. So there was, in essence, a very full airing of what occurred, why it occurred, what we could do going forward to prevent it, and to look at what we needed to prevent it, including Capitol Police, prosecution of the insurrectionists, mental health and well-being, equipment, training, intelligence gathering, etc. So,
thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to thank you for all this hard work and leadership. And clearly, the sooner we move this bill, the better, in order to make sure that all of us are secure And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Neguse.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Granger.
yes, may I just say, to make everything very clear, all the meetings that were held were excellent. The presentations were important. There was more higher attendance at that than anything I think that I have been involved in since I've been in Congress. But I do want to make sure that things are straightforward. And the committee minority did not stop having an open hearing. The committee had not been organized at that time. So we had the hearing that we had to have. And that's how it happened. We did not ask for it. But I do want to make sure that people know there was a number of meetings held and wonderful attendance because all the Congress, Democrats and Republicans, are very concerned about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neguse.
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for this panel? Hearing none, I want to thank both Chairwoman DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger for their participation. You are now dismissed. We will hear any amendment testimony on HR 3237 at the end of this hearing. I would now like to call up our next panel to testify on HR 3233, the National Commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member, we're delighted that you are here. Without objection, any written materials you submit to rules documents at mail.house.gov before the conclusion of this hearing will be entered into the record. And before I yield to you, I just want to say something here. So I just received right before this hearing my leader's statement in opposition to this commission. We just heard from my Republican colleagues on the Rules Committee about the previous bill we just discussed, about how they wish it had been more bipartisan. I want to thank both Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Katko for actually working together on a bipartisan bill. But I have to tell you, I mean, I'm looking at the minority leader statement, and I'm pissed, to be honest with you, because I'm also looking at the letters that he sent to the Speaker throughout this process, expressing concern over provisions that he wanted to be addressed. And both Mr. Thompson and Mr. Katko appear to have addressed every single one of his concerns. Equal distribution between Democrats and Republicans on the commission. Even on the issue of subpoena power, both of you worked out a deal that responds to his concern. I mean, I go right down the list. I think the only thing that there's a difference is that he wanted the report to be issued on November 1st. Your bill says December 31st, and I think probably that's a smart move simply because it's taken a while to get to this point. And so I guess what's frustrating to me is that this doesn't seem to be a disagreement over substance or over policy. But I do think this is an issue of character, and this is an issue of fitness to lead. I really do. And, you know, as somebody who was here on January 6th, who was the last person off the House floor, and who walked into the Speaker's gallery and saw these rioters smashing the windows on the doors, seeing the hate in their eyes, seeing people walking around this, on video after that, walking around this Capitol with Confederate flags and with anti-Semitic T-shirts. I mean, and then fast forward today, where we have some members of Congress who are basically saying that what happened, what we all experienced, what we saw, didn't really happen. I mean, enough. Now, I assume what happened is Trump got wind that we were doing this and called up the minority leader and said, I don't like it. And so that's what we got this opposition press release. But I'm going to tell you, if there's anybody in this chamber who doesn't believe that it's important to get to the truth about what happened on the 6th, or who doesn't, who wants to make believe that what happened on the 6th didn't happen on the 6th, that it's like a typical tourist day on the Capitol, they are not fit to serve in this chamber. And I've had it. I talked earlier about talking to staff members, talking to people, talking to the Capitol Police, talking to people who work in the cafeteria who are traumatized by the attack on this chamber. I mean, this was the Vice President of the United States was a target. And yet, in a bipartisan way, Mr. Thompson and Mr. Katko come together and give us a finished product that should enjoy the support of every single member of this chamber. And the top leader of the Republican Party comes out and said, I can't do it. Can't support it. I mean, it is pathetic. And you know, I'm sorry for venting, but you know, I'm worried about this institution in the long term. I'm worried about this country and about the integrity of our democracy and our political institutions. People have to stand up and do what's right. People have to stand up and for the truth. And one way to do that is to support what these two gentlemen are bringing before us. So with that, let me yield to Mr. Thompson for any his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, before I begin, let me acknowledge how strange it's to be with all of you and not have our dear colleague, Mr. Hastings, here with us. He was a good friend, and I have to say, whenever I came to Rules, I never ceased to be impressed with his compassion, intellect, and his wit.
And he would use more colorful language than I just used.
No question about it. Turning to H.R. 3233, January 6th was a day of trauma and tragedy that continues to cast a long shadow on the nation. On that day, Americans witnessed their fellow Americans attacking the citadel of democracy, the United States Capitol. On February 4th, the committee held a hearing titled Examining the Domestic Terrorism Threat in the Wake of the Attack on the United States Capitol, where receiving testimony regarding the attack and how the circumstances demanded a bipartisan investigation by counterterrorism experts. Today, nearly 5 months after the attack, there are still many unanswered questions about the events of that day that need to be answered to prevent future attacks. And there is growing recognition that Congress needs to look outside of these hallowed walls to get those answers. We need to do as we did after the devastating attacks of September 11th and stand up a bipartisan commission to investigate the facts and causes of the attack. It's no accident that H.R. 3233 closely mirrors the legislation that authorized the 9/11 Commission. For almost 2 decades, the 9/11 Commission has been viewed as the gold standard for how national security leaders come together patriotically in a bipartisan way to make America more secure. The events of January 6th demand that we, as a Congress, rise again to the occasion and display the same kind of patriotism and bipartisanship that resulted in the establishment of the 9/11 Commission. To that end, I'm pleased to be joined by my partner on the Homeland Security Committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Katko. Together, we collaborated to develop H.R. 3233, a bill to establish a 10-member bipartisan commission to investigate this attack. The commission will include experts in relevant fields who are not currently serving in government. It encourages the appointment of experts in a broad range of fields, from law enforcement and intelligence to cybersecurity and civil liberties. With respect to scope, like the 9/11 Commission, whose mandate was to investigate the circumstances surrounding the 9/11 attacks. This commission is charged with investigating the facts and circumstances surrounding the January 6th attack. I understand that some would like to see this inquiry expanded to investigate matters far removed from the events of that day. To those folk, I would say this commission's mandate is very intentionally focused on the largest attack on our capital since the British troops set fire to the building in the summer of 1814. That attack was by far a hostile foreign power takeover. This attack involved went too far and which did not go far enough. We all must be thankful that our nation has not experienced an attack of this scale on our soil in nearly 2 decades that have passed. I urge the Rules Committee to approve a closed rule on this measure and allow the House to take an up and down vote on this legislation in a timely manner, and I thank the panel for their attention. I welcome any questions, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, and we're delighted to welcome Mr. Katko. Thank you for your efforts on this, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I start, I do want to lament also the absence of Elsie Hastings. You may not know, but every day on the floor of the House, I would walk in and we would compare socks to see whose was more brighter and more garish. And I often won, but he gave me a good run for my money. And so in honor of him today, I have a very funky pair of socks on that some would say are very ugly, but I'm doing them in honor of Elsie. So Chairman McGovern, Ranking Member Cole, and members of the committee, I want to thank you for this opportunity to testify on H.R. 3233, the National Commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol Complex Act. This year, we will observe the 20th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on September 11th of 2001, an attack where I lost many of my friends. It will serve as a sober reminder of the fragility of our security and resilience of our democracy. After the terror attacks on 9/11, Congress recognized the importance of establishing a bipartisan commission to investigate those heinous acts. Out of the highly respected 9/11 Commission came many concrete recommendations that were later enacted into law. These critical reforms greatly improved our Homeland Security enterprise, intelligence collection, and information sharing, among others. But we still have work to do. The security breach that took place at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th was unacceptable and tragic. It was a major breakdown in information sharing and preparedness, much like the shortfalls that existed prior to 9/11. Unfortunately, we know the Capitol remains a target for extremists of all ideologies, as we also witnessed during the April 2nd vehicle attack at the Capitol that took a Capitol police officer's life. H.R. 3233 would create an independent, bipartisan commission to investigate and provide findings and recommendations on the January 6th attack, including information sharing gaps, decision-making, and other bureaucratic failures, as well as security vulnerabilities as a whole in the Capitol complex. Modeled after the 9/11 Commission, this bill creates a 10-member panel with 5 commissioners appointed by each party and equal subpoena authority. Appointed commissioners who cannot be current government employees must have significant experience in at least 2 of the following areas: government service, law enforcement, civil rights, civil liberties and privacy, the armed forces, intelligence, counterterrorism, cybersecurity, technology, and law. It has nothing to do with which party you're in. It has to do with your qualifications. The Commission's report, which must be agreed upon by a majority of commissioners, will include findings and recommendations to prevent future attacks on our democratic institutions and improve the security of the Capitol. The December 2020 deadline allows for a much shorter timeline than originally proposed, and for good reason. The American people and the Capitol Police deserve answers and improvements as soon as possible to ensure nothing like this ever happens again. As I have called for since the days just after the attack, an independent 9/11 style review is critical for removing the politics surrounding January 6th. We all know there's a lot of politics surrounding January 6th. And for focusing solely on the facts and circumstances of the security breach at the Capitol, as well as other instances of violence relevant to such a review. I can't state this more plainly enough. This is about facts. It's not about partisan politics. It's about making the Capitol Police Complex stronger. It's about making the Capitol safer. It's about making the Capitol Police Department or officers, which by admission is a very dysfunctional group right now with 92% of their members having no confidence in their leadership, going to make them better. We have to make them better. We owe it to the line people who risk their lives to protect us every single day. I want to thank the strong partnership with Chairman Thompson. In short, he's a good man, and he's a fair man, and he wants to do the right thing, and he did the right thing here. We were able to rise above the politics and turn the initial partisan proposal into a reasonable, nonpartisan bill. Now, H.R. 3233 is nearly identical to the original commission bill, H.R. 275, that Ranking Member Davis, Comer, and I, along with 28 other Republican co-sponsors, introduced on January 13th, 6 days after the attack. I can't say enough how much I appreciate Chairman Thompson's robust collaboration and strong commitment to working together on this effort. The American people expect Congress to put partisanship aside for the sake of our homeland security. That is exactly what this bill does. This is exactly what Chairman Thompson and I did, and I'm very proud of it. And for that, I'll take any questions you have, and I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both of you. You know, and again, I look forward to supporting the bill when it comes to the floor. And look, I think you did everything that reasonable people would expect you to do, and that is to reach an agreement here, to come up with a proposal that is nonpartisan, again, very much all after the 9/11 Commission, to establish the truth. So you did everything everybody expected you to do, except some people expected you to fail. Some people expected that you would not work in a bipartisan manner. Some people expected you would not, or maybe some people were hoping you would not come up with a bill like the one you came up with. You know, I'm looking at, I'm listening to some of the, all of a sudden, criticism of your work. One was that somehow this would interfere with the ongoing judicial proceedings. And I'm looking at the bill here, and if I'm reading this correctly, it says that you're to examine and evaluate evidence developed by relevant federal, state, and local governmental agencies in a manner that is respectful of ongoing law enforcement activities and investigations regarding the domestic terrorist attack upon the Capitol, regarding the facts and circumstances surrounding such terrorist attack and targeted violence and domestic terrorism relevant to such terrorist attack. And I also want to put in the record a letter from over 140 former national security, military, and elected officials calling on Congress to create a bipartisan 1-6 commission. But in their letter, they talk about in the wake of September 11th, the administration and Congress jointly acknowledged that the attack causes were complex and that an independent and well-equipped commission was an essential tool to aid the federal government. Congressional inquiries, law enforcement activities, and national commission not only worked in parallel, but critically complemented each other's necessary work. I just ask both of you, I mean, can you respond to the questions that some have raised, that somehow this will interfere with important ongoing investigations or work?
I'd be happy to take that if you like. I've been in law enforcement for 20 years before I was a in Congress, and criminal investigations always reign supreme. And there are safeguards built into the system. But in order to really look at that allegation or that position, think back to 9/11 Commission. They were full bore investigating what happened after the commission. There was prosecutions that happened. There were things that happened afterwards, investigations all over the country. There were subpoenas everywhere. There was a worldwide search for the perpetrators that survived that attack, and they were brought to justice. And the commission did not follow up any of that when they were doing theirs. And I see the parallel here being very similar. Like you said, in the bill itself, there is reference to acknowledging those investigations and prosecutions and not interfering with them. But there's procedural safeguards that ensure that for sure, including the Fifth Amendment. But on top of that, you have precedent from the 9/11 Commission, whether these people that aren't going to be on this commission will be able to work around those constraints. And I don't view them as constraints at all, because really what we're looking at is, in my opinion, more important than anything is, how did this happen? How did we fail to act on the intelligence we knew was there? How were we not ready at the Capitol? And why in God's name did we put these poor Capitol Hill police officers in an unwinnable situation where 140 of them were injured with Metropolitan Police officers? That's the real nub of this. It's not a political considerations or the people being held accountable. We're not a criminal investigatory body. We're a body to try and make the Capitol safer and make the Capitol Police Department much, much, much better, and to find out what help they need going forward. That's how I see it. I yield back.
Mr. Chair, the criminal justice system is working. Those 458 individuals who are being charged criminally should be. We are not in that process. But more importantly, we have to look forward in anticipation of what might happen again. And part of this commission's challenge is to look at the facts and circumstances that got us to January 6th, and to the extent practicable, try to alleviate them. So we're not in the way. One of the sayings, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. And that commission clearly can do its work and not interfere with any of the prosecutions ongoing.
Thank you. Again, I want to commend Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Katko for their work. And I go back to my original remarks. This is what really is frustrating to me at this moment, because I do think this is, given the severity of what happened on January 6th, this is a time when everybody should come together. And I'm looking at Republican Leader McCarthy's letter to Speaker Pelosi, and the things that he's asking for: an equal 5-5 ratio in appointments by Democrats and Republicans, co-equal subpoena power for chair and vice chair of the commission, no inclusion of findings or other predetermined conclusions which ultimately should be rendered by the commission itself. It's like mission accomplished. What am I missing here? And I say this because many of us believe in bipartisanship, but if you end up engaging in the kind of negotiations that you both successfully engaged in, and the response is no, then what's the motivation to engage in bipartisan negotiations? Why is there opposition to this? Mr. Katko, what's missing here that's so substantive and so big a deal that it would compel people to say oppose it?
Listen, I absolutely respect my colleagues' decisions to take a different point of view. Politics is not always about everybody agreeing. Oftentimes it's about agreeing to disagree, and that's what we're doing here. And I'm just proud of the fact that there's going to be some Republican support for it, a considerable amount, I hope. But regardless, I just know that in my heart, that from what I see from my perch with Benny at top of the Homeland Security Committee, that for us to lead on this is important, and that's what we're doing.
Well, there's no question, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
that was give and take. We really want the bipartisan nature of this commission to be the gold standard for how we go forward. We made every effort. In all reality, I gave more to try to make this work. And you can see from the documentation that that's what I did, because I've been on the Homeland Security Committee ever since it was a select committee. I know the importance of what this commission means to the security of this country. So it's important that Democrats and Republicans put aside the partisan definition, because generally, when the bad people show up, Mr. Chairman, they don't ask party affiliation.
Right.
They just want to hurt Americans. When those individuals attacked the Capitol, they came for the vice president, who was a Republican. They came for the speaker, who was a Democrat. You know, they came for what we represent as a nation. And I think that's what we have to defend by having this commission front and center and providing advice and counsel to Congress.
You know, and I appreciate that, Chairman Thompson. And I've sat in on many of the chairman's meetings and leadership meetings with you, and I know that there were some on our side who was like, you know, why give this and why give that, or why should we do this or why should we do that? And I'm sure the Republicans had the same conversations on their side. But both of you, Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Katko, actually came together and put this institution and put this country first. And I'm grateful. And I'm just, and again, I trust that hopefully there'll be a strong bipartisan vote on this. But again, I am a little dismayed with the minority leader's statement. I'm reading a quote now from that appeared in Politico from a Republican aide who described the bind that the minority leader was in. I quote him. He says, "This is a Republican aide. I think Kevin was hoping that the Democrats would never agree to our request. That way the commission would be partisan and we can all vote no and say it's a sham operation, because he knows Trump is going to lose his mind over this commission." And and it's just so disheartening and disturbing to read that, given what we all saw, and given the fact that we have some colleagues who are denying that we all experienced even happened. So I've said enough. I just I want you both to know how much respect I have for you, and I think that the American people are grateful that you're doing the right thing. And these experts, not politicians, will issue a report, for history that hopefully will inform us in terms of how we should proceed, but also make sure the historical record is accurate. With that, I yield to my ranking member, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by echoing your praise for both these two members. I think that you both did work together in very good faith, and I think it is important that you came together with an agreement. And I agree with the chairman of the committee that you gave a lot, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely. And I agree with my good friend from New York that he got a lot. So let's start with that. While there's some questions, and I have some questions, I'm going to give you both an opportunity to answer them. Doesn't change the fact that I admire both of you for working so well together. And I think the product that you're presenting to us is far superior to the product that you began to work with. Far superior. You'd both be commended for that. Let me start, obviously, on our side, or for some members, there is concern about scope. That'd be the first question I would ask. And 9/11 Commission did have pretty broad scope. I mean, it dealt with, went back and looked at everything from the attack on the embassies to the attack on the USS Cole, no relation. You know, there's a pretty broad parameter. As I understand it, this is a much narrower focus. We'll see some amendments, you know, that deal with everything from the shooting at the baseball field to we had a wave of violence last year. Is this part of that in a broader sense? I frankly would argue that it is. And then, you know, the Good Friday shooting incident that we had as well. Are those things appropriate to, and I'll start with you, Mr. Chairman, and then move to the ranking member. Are those things that would be considered by this commission or would be appropriate to consider in your opinion?
Well, let me just say, Mr. Ranking Member, the scope of the committee is to look at the circumstances and facts surrounding January 6th. If the commission wanted to, they could, but it's clearly directed at January 6th. We have, in good faith, met Republicans, I think more than halfway on everything that's been said so far. So to try to, at the last minute, to stretch beyond January 6th is not the good faith that I had anticipated this commission being about. So I would say there's still potential to look at other things, but clearly if you saw, like every other American, what went on January 6th, you would be, and I know you are, quite upset at what went on, how it happened, and the fact that, Mr. Ranking Member, normally we'd have school children here right now throughout the summer looking at the Capitol, tourists bragging about how we as a country